Hi everyone, it's Tara Bianca with Be Light Transformative Therapy. And today I wanted to share another personal story. And I think this one really reflects how our geography, our location, our immediate environment has such a huge impact on our ability to regulate our nervous system, and then consequently, our ability to effectively manage the stressors in our lives. Quick disclaimer, if you're not up for another personal story today, then this video is not for you, but I promise to return next week with more formal video tutorials. Also, next week, please keep an eye out because I just created 3 new video series devoted to managing anxiety, devoted to really getting anxiety relief using simple and quick to implement tools. So I'll be sure to let you guys know about those next week. Keep your eyes and your ears peeled. Okay, so this topic might seem really obvious to most of you, right? It's kind of obvious that our immediate environment, or the environment that we're moving through regularly throughout the day, is obviously going to have an impact on our nervous system, right? And our ability to regulate our nervous system, meaning our ability to regulate stress in our lives. But I just had this personal experience happen, and it reminded me of this so much. So let's go back to my childhood for a second. You know, I think of myself as a native New Yorker. So for those of you who don't know, I wasn't born in New York City. I was born in a town maybe 90 minutes outside of New York City, but I spent a lot of time in New York as a child, and then it really became my home as an adult. So as kids, I was a dancer. My aunt was a dance teacher, and she owned a small dance studio in the town where I grew up. And so me and my cousins were all dancers. We were all into the performing arts. And my aunt also had an apartment in Times Square. So now we're going back to the 80s. So New York City in the 80s, in the heart of it, in the dredges of it, in Times Square, and she's bringing in these 3 little girls to go take dance class. So I used to go into the city a lot as a kid to go take dance classes in the city, and my aunt had this apartment, and we'd stay in Times Square, and I just fell in love with that New York City energy from a really young age. I became enamored with New York, and I knew this is the place that I want to be. And so when I was 18, I finally did move to New York City officially. I went to NYU, so I did all my university studies in New York City, and then I just stayed there. And so the crazy thing about living in an intense urban environment like that, with millions of people running around, unpredictable movements, unpredictable actions, constantly having to guard yourself, constantly having to keep watch over yourself, is that it really creates this hypervigilance inside of you, right? And it's happening gradually, and it's happening subtly. And so you're just acclimating, and your threshold is rising, rising, rising. So your baseline of what is stressful is suddenly up here as opposed to down here, right? And what that looks like in application, at least in my case, is someone who is constantly running, constantly doing, can't sit still, always fidgeting, always like looking behind my back, always keeping an eye in a million different directions at the same time, constantly having to navigate and shift around millions of people, constantly having to protect, constantly having to defend, always lugging tons of weight with me, right? So New York City is the pedestrian city, and every pedestrian in that city has some massive bag filled with their entire life for the day that they just take with them, because no one gets back to their apartment in the middle of the day, right? Once we go out for the day, we are out. So we're constantly lugging bags, lugging groceries, lugging gym clothes, dance clothes, career equipment. In my case, sometimes I would lug a massage table around the city. I mean, so it's insane the level of stress and the level of sort of voluntary oppression that we take on, like this physical burden, this emotional burden, this mental burden, this nervous system burden that we allow into our beings, into our vessels, and that we really take on, and that we think is normal. So my chronic state of living in New York for 23 years is that I'm in hypervigilance all the time, and I don't even know it, right? My stress threshold is up here, and it takes a lot to push me further, but I also never come down. And so historically, it used to be that even if I'd maybe go to a beach town for a week or something to unwind and quote unquote relax, I mean, it's insane. You can't just shed this hypervigilance overnight, right? It's a process of shedding it, of taking off the cloak. So you'd see me walking on this beautiful beach at 100 miles per hour. God knows where I think I'm going. There's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to be. It's just that doing, that marching, that have to be productive, that forward progression is just such a part of my being. I take it with me wherever I go. And then furthermore, so my mom's house is she's not in the countryside. It's sort of a classic suburb where I was raised. And so it's a little bit of a mix of urban and rural. A classic suburb. I don't know how else to describe it. It's kind of quiet, but then there's like a strip mall 5 minutes down the road, and it's not that fancy or nice, right? So it used to be that when I'd come visit my mom and stay over for a night or two, coming from New York City, I used to be terrified. Even though it's not totally silent here, like a rural area, it was unnerving to me. The silence was unnerving to me. And more so, I couldn't even fathom a world where people are living and sleeping on the first floor of a house without bars on their windows to protect them, right? In New York, you would never have a basement apartment or a first floor apartment and just leave your windows open and exposed. It would be life-threatening, right? So I could never wrap my head around this suburban or rural life of like, people aren't caging themselves into their sleeping space just to keep themselves safe overnight. How are you going to protect yourself? So this used to be my mindset for a long time. I couldn't shut down. I couldn't relax. I didn't know how to down-regulate my nervous system, and I thought it was normal. And more so, sleeping in New York City, I mean, think about it. It's literally the city that never sleeps. So you're going about your business for decades, being a human being in this urban environment, and you are never exposed to total darkness. You are never exposed to total silence, and you are never exposed to total stillness. So your nervous system is constantly pulsing. So then those of you who've been following me for a while know that I actually had to leave New York back in August of 2021. So end of August, we're already coming up on a year that I've been out of New York. So New York City was my home as an adult human being for about 23 years. And then less than a year ago, I had to move out. And it was a little bit traumatizing, right? It was very stressful. I was sad to leave the city. I was sad to leave my life, my career, everything that I've kind of built over the last 2 decades, but more so, I was really afraid of coming to the suburbs because this is the place where people don't put bars on their first floor windows. And I was afraid I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. I was really kind of terrified of like, what is this experience going to be like? I don't know if I can manage it. And so now coming up on my 1-year anniversary out of the city, it's taken time. I was really kind of unsettled when I first got here, when I first arrived here, and it's taken months to really finally shed off that hypervigilance, that fear of who's going to be outside my window, who's trying to break into my space, who's trying to assault me, who's trying to threaten me. It's taken months for me to kind of reconfigure my wiring and see my immediate environment with different eyes, with a different perception. And now I'm feeling quite comfortable here. And so what's the twist of this story? What was the incident that actually happened that made me want to shoot this video? Is that, my birthday was a week and a half ago now, and my boyfriend had these amazing surprises for me, all of which were taking place in New York City. So since I moved out in August, I've only been back to the city twice, and each of those 2 visits was just for a day. It wasn't even an overnight trip. So I haven't been back in much. And so this was my first time to go back into the city and really stay there for a couple days. And what I noticed was, boom, I was like right back in it of holy smokes. Like it's like putting on a metal jacket, right? It's like putting on a really thick coat to protect yourself. Like that hypervigilance comes back on a dime. And I noticed myself like really kind of like looking around my shoulder a lot, looking over my shoulder a lot, looking around me a lot, constantly monitoring again the million different things and the million different people going on around me. And it wasn't unsettling, but I was so acutely aware of like, holy smokes, Tara, this has been your default nervous system setting for decades. Like, no wonder you have digestion problems. No wonder you have anxiety issues. No wonder you struggle with your mood. No wonder you struggle with emotional eating sometimes. No wonder you have menstrual issues, or no wonder your inflammatory markers are elevated, because look at this environment that you're living in. And in having this experience so recently, it also gave me a lot more, or I will say a renewed compassion and empathy for my clients and the people I work with, especially those who are living in a really intense urban environment and who either don't want to or for whatever reason can't escape it, right? Because we are forced to adapt to that environment, and adaptation is great, except when it's this constant, prolonged stress, hypervigilance, guarding, protecting. It takes such a toll on the body physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually over time. And now it's kind of funny because, I'm always on the go. I'm always moving as fast as I can. And since I've been here back at my mom's, it's like a taking off of the heavy cloak, right? It's like a slow removal of this massive weight that's been holding me down. And what's interesting is I don't want to move at all. Like, people ask me to go places, like I have no desire to go anywhere. I used to have massive amounts of wanderlust, and I've traveled pretty extensively around the world, and I used to love to just go and go and go for months at a time, carrying my life on my back. And now that I have this opportunity to finally find darkness, to finally find silence, to finally find stillness, it's like I'm soaking it up on a cellular level, right? My body is just soaking it up. It's been needing this for so long, and I've been depriving my body of it because I didn't know it needed this so badly. And so now I just want to be. I don't want to drive anywhere. I don't want to go anywhere near an airport. I don't feel like traveling. I don't feel like running around crazy, running errands. I just want to enjoy my stillness. And like I said, people have been making fun of me for it. Friends of mine, family of mine. But I'm really aware of, like, okay, I spent more than 2 decades up here, never coming down. And now it's like, I just might need a little bit of time to finally get into true rest and recovery and help those inflammatory markers to come back down and invite my body to reclaim this silence and this stillness that it so desperately needs. Related to this is a story that my friend told me once. She is not from New York, she's from Florida, and she made it through her New York City career for about, I think, 5 or 6 years, and then she was done. So she's not a native New Yorker, and she's not a veteran New Yorker, right? She got the experience, and then she had to get out. And I remember right before she moved out, she was telling me, she's like, Tara, I remember living in Union Square at one point. And for those of you who don't know New York City like that, we have major thoroughfares, major intersections every 10 to 20 blocks, right? So Times Square is 42nd Street, and every train runs underground there, and every bus goes through there, and there's a million forms of transportation, and it's just heat and energy and vibration, just multiple stories underground and multiple stories above ground. It's a lot of heat and it's a lot of movement. And we have those pods of extreme energy, extreme heat, extreme movement every 10 to 20 blocks. So Union Square then is like 14th Street. It's like the Union Square of 14th Street. It's like the Times Square of 14th Street, meaning all the trains run underneath there. There's a lot of tall buildings. There's a million forms of transportation. It's a main hub. There's a ton of people. And so she had an apartment in this Union Square area, pretty up high, not on a first floor, maybe 6th, 7th, 8th floor of her apartment building. And she remembers going to sleep one night. So going to sleep, right? Darkness, stillness, silence. That's what we would typically crave to get a good sound night's sleep. And she remembers looking at the glass of water on her bedstand, and it was just vibrating. The water in the glass was just constantly vibrating. And she had this epiphany, like, oh my God, like my body is 65, 70, 75% water. If the energy from this area is enough to keep this glass of water trembling all night, imagine what is going on inside my body right now, inside of my fascia, inside of every cell. And so she had this real, like, I gotta get out of here moment. Those of you who follow my tuning fork video series, for example, we talk a lot about the amazing potential benefits and the beautiful things that certain frequencies, certain vibrations, certain sounds can offer us on the nervous system level, on the cellular level, on the mental, emotional, physical, spiritual level. But frequency, sound, vibration also have their counterpart, right? They can also really negatively impact the body, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And that's what she was experiencing in that moment of like, wow, this vibration, this particular New York frequency is pouring through my cells at every second, assaulting me every second. This has to be impacting my health. So I think the big takeaway here, which again may be obvious to most of you, is that your immediate environment plays such a huge role in not only your perception of the world, but also what is going on inside your body, how your nervous system is being regulated or dysregulated, and how you're really able to cope with the stressors in your life effectively without it injuring your body, without it injuring your mind, without it injuring your spirit and your soul. And I think the other takeaway is that it's really important for us to cultivate more body awareness, more nervous system awareness. Like I was running for decades, and it wasn't that I was completely unaware of it, but I didn't really know the impact it was having on the deepest level. And I can see it now, and I can feel that now. So to cultivate this greater awareness, but also to be patient with ourselves and allowing with ourselves, and to realize that to take a multiple decade-long habit and just flip it on a dime is not the easiest thing in the world to do, that we can be more allowing with how much time it takes for us to start to heal and reverse this upward curve that we've created over so many years. And then the third takeaway is that most of us, well, at least in my life and in this kind of tri-state area of the United States where I live, are really stuck up here and we don't even know it. And overwhelmingly, we need tools to help us get down, to downregulate the nervous system and to truly help us get into recovery, into a state where we can finally heal, get into a state where we can finally just sleep deeply and reap all those benefits of a beautiful night's sleep. So really collecting these simple and immediately actionable tools and keeping them in our tool belt is so helpful. Things like the guided breathing sessions that I do with you guys. Things like using a tuning fork on your chest. So easy and yet so nourishing, so downregulating to the nervous system. Things like meditation. Things like taking a walk in nature. These are simple, overwhelmingly free, and easy to implement tools. And the more we do them, little bursts of self-care like that with high frequency throughout the week in order to sort of counterbalance this giant weight of hypervigilance that most of us are stuck in really does have the benefit of healing us on multiple levels. Okay, that's it for today. This story was a little bit all over the place, but I hope you got some value out of it. If you liked today's video, please give it a thumbs up. And as always, it means so much to me if you can subscribe to the channel. Remember to keep your eyes peeled next week because I have 3 new video series for anxiety relief that I'm going to be releasing on my website. I'll be sure to keep you guys updated on that. If you're interested in a more in-depth breath training and you've never signed up for it, please make sure you sign up for my totally free Breath Basics 6-day challenge, which is also hosted on my website. And then if you'd like to have more personal, intimate time like this with me, sharing stories, sharing experiences, sharing ideas, and also doing a live monthly Q&A, and also a live monthly guided community breath session, then please consider joining my Be Late community. And lastly, if you'd like to further support the channel and the work that I do here, you may always do so by either visiting my Buy Me a Coffee page or by purchasing something in my brand new Be Light store. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.